Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is the Thursday edition of the live streams here at Rogers Gardens. Usually on the Thursday edition, you see me, Sarah Smith. I'm a horticulturist here at Rogers Gardens, and we're typically talking about whatever the plant of the week is. So it always varies. It's whatever we have that's just absolutely beautiful at this time. It's usually an exclusive here to Rogers Gardens, or we have a special going on. So it'll be like the flower of the month, which is buy two, get one free. This one is about the rose of the year. So this is the rose of the year. I have this beautiful picture here. This is just starting to bud out. This just came off the truck this morning. I grabbed it before it even hit the floor. It's got some really beautiful buds coming on here. This is Princesse Charlene of Monaco. It is so super gorgeous. It's a beautiful flower. The last couple of years I've been seeing it come in. This rose was bred in 2013, so it's much newer on the market. But the coloration on this is just totally superb. The real trendy kind of flower colors right now are all the like peaches and apricot colors, even little bits of tan, especially in floral arranging. So if you are anywhere on Pinterest, you'll see that it's all those blushy pretty colors. And this one is absolutely fantastic for that. It is such a gorgeous kind of apricot to shell pink kind of color. It's a very old-fashioned style petal count. So that meaning that when it opens up, it's not just like a bullet kind of rose. So I have one in my hair right now that I grabbed. This is a new one too. This is Chantilly Cream. Chantilly Cream. That's right. I had to confirm. I'm like, all of a sudden I just blinked on it because it just showed up a couple days ago. So this is more like that kind of bullet style rose where the rose is really tight. When it opens up, it's that very traditional rose kind of shape that we all think about. That like when you get a dozen red long stem roses, those are bullet shaped roses, right? But the old fashioned roses are really coming out, like back into play. People are really liking that. They usually have a gargantuan petal count, almost like a peony inside. And that's absolutely what this looks like once it really gets full and big. This is it just starting to open, but once the center part opens, it's like cabbagey in the middle. It's just super beautiful, super pretty. This is a very long stemmed rose too. This is a pretty tall rose. So if you're planting this in your garden or planting in a pot, think about the height. This is going to be a lot taller and narrower than most of your roses. So when you're planting a rose garden, you really want to think about coloration. I always think a really beautiful, well-planned rose garden, the colors kind of match into each other and kind of almost move down the spectrum. So if you have a bunch of different colors, that's fine, but you want to kind of keep the ones that are complementary next to each other and keep moving down that path that way. That's a really well-planned rose garden, and where someone actually thinks about the size. This is going to be a hybrid tea rose, so you're going to have just a couple of flowers on the end, not multiple tiny little flowers like you would with a floribunda, but planted next to a floribunda would be gorgeous, and planted next to a really complementary floribunda like Distant Drums, which is both Suzanne and I's favorite. So if you watch any of our live streams on Tuesdays and Thursdays, if we're ever talking roses, we're always kind of bringing that one up. But that color would be so complementary with this. It is a shorter rose, so it would be nice to have them next to each other because this will give you the height and the other one will give you something lower. So you have flowers up high, you have flowers down low. That's a really well thought out, really well planned rose garden. That's very important. But this is great for cut because you're going to get those long, beautiful stems on it, which is so great. So you can do tiny little bud vases. You can do big arrangements too because you're going to have the long and tall. I think it's really kind of amazing that everybody's getting a lot more into cutting gardens. A couple of years ago, that wasn't even really a thing. Some people were doing it, but it wasn't as big as it is now. And I think a big part of it, honestly, I'll give it up to Pinterest. It's because people are going on and they're seeing all these beautiful flowers and they're able to grow them in their gardens, and the flower arranging trend has gotten a lot more kind of painterly. It's a little more wild, it's a little more open, things are a little bit bigger. It's not these little tiny tight little budded flowers anymore that people are looking for. They're looking for the big lush kind of full spilling, very Dutch painting style of flower arranging. So I think that's just kind of mimicking itself back into the garden, and people are realizing I can grow this stuff and bring it in. So if you're already deadheading your stuff, and that's another big thing, I think people are cutting them when they're just about done to be in the garden, but they're bringing them in the house and they're enjoying it, and they're realizing there's beauty in that. It's absolutely gorgeous. So this is a really, really great one for it. Coloration is just super, super pretty. I'm going to talk a little bit about the things that you can do to make your roses happy. The first thing is location, location, location. That's super huge for roses. They want to be in full sun. Full sun is super important. Roses can have a tendency to get things like powdery mildew and rust and things like that, partially because we have a big, heavy marine layer here. You cannot control the marine layer, but you can control how you plant your rose and how you treat your rose. That will really help with those things. So you want to make sure there's good air circulation wherever you're planting your rose. So you want to make sure that you're keeping them kind of thinned out. When you're picking your rose, you're looking for shape, not flowers. Everybody always asks me when they come in here, can you help me pick the best, prettiest rose? And everybody's always typically going by, oh, this one has flowers. And that's great. They're all going to get flowers though. The shape is important. The shape never changes. So if you pick one that's kind of a weird oddball shape, it's kind of leaning to one side, it's fanned out, it's not a nice 360. This is a nice 360. Look at that. It's so perfect. There is canes on every single side. That's super important because that part never changes. Flowers come and go. They're all going to flower if you're doing it right. So that's how you're going to pick. You want something where you can kind of put your hand down in the middle and there's not a big cane coming out the middle of the rose. That's really important. And you want to keep your roses thinned out. So we cut our roses back once a year. We strip them completely. You want to do that in January, so right after Christmas. And that really helps keep all the stuff off of them. It lets them flush out nice and new growth. This one has been totally stripped. This is all the nice new growth. But you want to make sure that you don't have canes in the middle. You don't have crossing canes. So that's your time to cut it and make sure that you have a good shape on your rose. You want that good air circulation. You want to make sure you're not getting the leaves wet. That is really important. You're not creating any more humidity in the air than we already naturally have here. So do not get your rose leaves wet. If you have spray heads, really think about switching over to bubblers because those sprays are creating all kinds of humidity in the air. You want to make sure that you're watering really early in the morning so that the soil is wet in the morning but has time to dry out. Watering at night is not really a great practice because it's going to stay damp and moist all night long, and that creates a problem. And then you also want to make sure that when you're watering, long, low, and deep. If I teach you guys anything, that's the thing I really want you to walk away with, is that you're going to water really deeply so that way the low roots are getting water and that the upper high roots are drying out in between. So you're watering very, very deeply, very, very long, and then you're letting it dry out. So one of the biggest things I always ask everybody who comes in here and they show me a leaf and they say, what's the problem with this? My first thing that I ask them is, how are you watering? And so often I have people coming in saying, oh, I water for 3 minutes every single day. That's a lot of water, and that's too much, that's too shallow, and it's not deep enough. So you want to take that, add up all the days that you're doing that and divide it by 3 or 2 and then change it. So knowing how your sprinklers run, knowing how your roses are being watered and your garden is being watered is really, really key to a happy, healthy rose. I actually hand water all my roses with a hose. I don't use any irrigation in that area. That way I can control it and do it really nice and deep and long. And I just seriously put a hose there. I turn it on, I walk away, I clean up my roses, I feed my roses, and then I move it to the next one. So I run that really long and slow for about 7 minutes per rose and kind of just flood that area. That's your best way of irrigating, but you can obviously do that with drips too. Just make sure that they're watering really deeply and you're cutting it for a couple days. So 2-3 times maybe in the summertime, especially here in Southern California. If you're somewhere like in Texas, which I know we got a lot of people watching in different states, it's going to be a little bit different for you guys. So check with your local nursery about that and see what they suggest for how often you're watering your roses. But here, that's what you want to do. Roses are really, really heavy feeders. So you want to make sure that you're feeding them really well. You want to not use anything systemic or synthetic, so stay away from those things. If you open up your fertilizer and it is a weird bright neon color, throw it away. It is not the right one to use. I don't care what all the old 50s commercials told you back in the day, and now everybody is just so ingrained to use that bright blue fertilizer. Don't use that bright blue fertilizer. It adds so much nitrogen and so much phosphorus into the soil but it off gases all kinds of crazy things, and it kills all the good natural stuff in the soil. So plants are so much like humans. We need all that good bacteria, and we need to get rid of the bad bacteria, right? But it's just like with us. We want good gut health, we want good soil health. So you want to make sure that you have earthworms, that you have good mycorrhizae, you have beneficial bacteria, all that stuff in the ground. And if you're using that synthetic stuff, it's killing all of that. So that's really not great for the roses. I used to use it. I used to use the systemic blue bottle. You know what that is if you've ever gone to any of the big box stores. I used to use that once a month, and I used to think, wow, I always have all kinds of problems with rust and aphids and things like that, and this is the only way that I'm really controlling it. And when I came here, I switched over. I thought, okay, I'm going to switch over. I'm going to do the right thing. I switched over to the down to earth. So this one I use once a month. I use 1/4 of a cup to 1/2 of a cup per rose. I always do it the first of the month, so that way I don't forget. So I'm not good with calendars and stuff, so if I do that, I remember. When I switched to this, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to spray it all the time. I'm going to have problems with mildew all the time because I'm not using that systemic that's controlling it through the roots. And you know what? I don't have problems with that stuff anymore, which is amazing. I barely have mildew problems. I never have rust problems anymore. I used to have it all the time. I even very rarely get the little rose slugs, which is a really common thing where you see the little lacing out on the older leaves and it almost looks like someone's gone through with a hole punch and punched it out. I never have problems with that anymore either, and I very, very rarely spray my roses anymore. So it really makes a huge difference. The systemic stuff, a lot of rosarians are kind of realizing it's good at first for the first maybe year or two, but eventually it just kind of wears down your rose because it doesn't have all the good stuff that's naturally in there. And if you're not consistent, especially with that kind of fertilizer, it's even worse. So definitely stay away from that. The other thing that I really contribute to my rose health that's super amazing is the Malibu Compost Tea. This stuff is like magic. It's so fantastic. This is a little different. With this one, you just throw on the ground, you kind of water it in, you kind of get it in with your fingers a little bit. You don't need to really dig it in or anything crazy like that because you don't want to mess up the roots of the rose anyways. But this is a compost tea, and what's really neat about this, it actually is like a tea bag, right? It looks like this. So many people are like, what do I do? Like whenever I hand somebody with this, they're like super confused, and I was too. You're gonna throw this in a 5-gallon bucket of water and let it soak overnight. It's really good to put your water in and kind of let that off gas and get rid of all the pneumonia and things like that and all the chlorine that are naturally in the water, and then throw this in and let that soak overnight, and then you use the water from this to water your roses. You can even foliar spray your roses. This stuff is fantastic. This comes from a biodynamic farm. This has all kinds of fantastic, great stuff. This really encourages, especially if you've been using that systemic, you want to use some of this as well. You're not going to use this over this. This is like your food, like eating, and this one is like taking a probiotic and a vitamin, right? So this you have to have. This one really helps your plant actually take this up. It adds all that good mycorrhizae into the ground, which is a good beneficial fungi that attaches to the roots and makes the roots even more vigorous and pull up more nutrients. So it's really kind of amazing. But yeah, this is really great. This has a little bit of dried cow manure in it. It actually doesn't smell bad. I'll tell you what, this one, it's a little stinky. I'm not gonna lie. It almost has like a cabbagey smell to it. So if you're having a party, don't feed your roses right before you're gonna have your party. This is a lesson I learned the hard way. So I always think, okay, I'm gonna feed my roses. It's gonna smell maybe for about 2 days. So I just make sure I'm not having anybody over before I do that. And then I use the water from this to water this in. So I use this every other month. This is really great monthly. The reason I use mine every other month is my roses are in front of a window. And when I started using this, they got so big and beautiful and vigorous, but they got a little too tall. So I actually go down to every other month with this one. But one of these bags, you can treat about 5 roses because it'll fill up a 5-gallon bucket, and about a gallon of rose is totally great. If you only have a couple roses, this is still fantastic. You're just going to give them even more. And foliar spray too. This is really kind of great because they actually bring up nutrients through the foliage. If you're going to do that, preferably early in the morning, so it has some time to dry out. These also work really well in pots or in the ground, so make sure you're adding really good soil into the ground to make them really, really happy, or use a really good quality potting soil. If you're going to do it in a pot, you want to do it in a big pot. The bigger, the the better, especially this one because it's super, super tall. So go as big as you can possibly go. That's just easier for you for watering purposes and all that as well. Make sure it's in a nice full sunny spot. So you want to do something that's like at least a 15 gallon at the very least. Okay, so you want to make sure that it has the room to grow, so it has all the good above ground growth. You got to really be good about fertilizing if you're doing things in pots, because once that fertilizer runs out the bottom of the ground and out of the pot, it is no longer available to your plant. So the roots can't keep going down to search for it because it's gone out the bottom of the pot. So make sure you fertilize really well. If you do encounter problems, which occasionally we all will, that just happens. This is my favorite. So these 3 things are something I think every person buying a rose should go home with. This is the Safer brand. This is the Rose and Flower 3-in-1 garden spray. The little secret is there is also a veggie 3-in-1, and there's also one that just says 3-in-1. All the same price, all the same thing. So don't worry about whether or not it actually has the little rosebud on there. This works really, really well for powdery mildew and for rust. This has sulfur in it. The other thing that this has is insecticidal soap. So this also works on aphids, it works on whitefly, it works on mealy, all those little soft kind of sap sucking sort of things. This works really fantastically on. That's really the only problem I get, especially in the beginning when everything is nice and tender. Sometimes I get some aphids on there. You could spray it down with a hose and kind of keep it controlled. You're not going to move them around or spread the problem. They're so soft bodied. Once you knock them with a hose, it's going to kill them. But if you have a really bad problem, this is a really great one to have in stock. This is good on everything. I use this on my veggies, I use it on my roses, I use it on all my ornamentals. This is really a fantastic thing, and I think every good gardener should have this because this works on just about everything. I'm not a huge fan of putting neem oil on my roses. I will occasionally. I like that better mixed with a little bit of soap, but the neem oil can burn. That could be a problem, and it leaves the leaves a little sticky and goopy kind of feeling sometimes. So if it's like dusty, or if you're working on something nearby, or like your neighbors having construction, I find that all that stuff kind of settles on there and sticks on there. So I like it mixed with soap though. I think neem oil works really well if it's mixed with soap and you're kind of cutting it down a little bit more. But just using a plain neem oil and water, it works, but I like this so much better because it helps so much better. I find much better results with this. Never use real soap from your house on your plants. That's the other thing that I hope that everybody learns. Never, ever use Dawn. Never use dish soap, even if you're like, oh, it's an organic dish soap. It's a detergent, and a detergent's a fancy word for degreaser. Remember those old Dawn commercials where they drop a bit of Dawn and all the grease spreads in the water? That's not good for your plants because your plants have a natural waxy protective layer on the leaves. And if you use that too much, you're going to break up all the natural protection on the leaves. And now you're introducing your rose to so many more pathogens and things like that. And you can also burn with that. So stay away from using regular soap. Get yourself a small thing of insecticidal soap, one that's already pre-mixed or a concentrate. I don't care, however you get it, but that's going to work so much better than just a true dish soap because over time it's not good for your plants. It works right away. Sure, it kills the bugs, but over time it weakens your plant too. So you got to be real careful with that kind of stuff. So we are live, so we can answer any questions for you too. So if you've got any rose questions, throw them in there. We'll answer those questions for you. The other thing that I want to mention is we are having our spring opening this weekend, which I'm super excited about. Spring opening here at Rogers Gardens is always so amazing. We always have so many beautiful things. The store is on point. It just absolutely looks gorgeous. And the really fun thing that we're going to do is so it's this Saturday and Sunday is the official spring opening. I'm going to be walking around. Suzanne's going to be walking around, who's running around right now doing something. Hi, Suzanne. So Suzanne will be talking as well. We're going to just kind of walk around, have little areas staged, and we're going to talk about all kinds of really amazing different things with you live in person. So you can actually come in person, talk with us. I'm going to talk about vermiculture. Suzanne's going to talk about good plants for shade. I'm going to talk about growing citrus. Suzanne's got 2 talks. I've got 2 talks. We're both going to be here both Saturday and Sunday. So you can see us both at one time. And every single weekend after that, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to have some little mini talks, and there's going to be a theme. So if you're not signed up for the email list, get on there so you know what kind of things we're going to be talking about. The following week's going to be just general garden care 101. We're going to have a gourmet garden food edition. We're going to have one about roses. We're going to have all different kinds of cool things, talking about all kinds of fun stuff. Earth Day, it's going to go all the way up into April or May. So every single weekend we're going to have something super fun, with the exception of Mother's Day and Easter. That's just fun in itself. But we'll have all kinds of different things. We'll be talking about monarchs. We're going to have so many fun, super duper amazing things. So make sure you're signed up for that email list. And I know someone's probably asked about Disney roses, so I will tell you, Disney roses are almost here. And if you're not signed up for the email list, you won't know when they come in. So make sure you sign up for that, because we'll tell you when we're going to get that. We'll tell you when we're going to get milkweed. You'll know all those things right away. As soon as we get them, you'll know. So make sure you sign up for that. Make sure you come in this weekend. I'm so excited. It'll be so much fun to actually see people in person, interact with you all in person, walk around the garden, see all the amazing, beautiful things we've got going on. It's going to be absolutely amazing. So this Saturday and Sunday. So, do we have any questions?
Yes. The first question is, what do you recommend I do to my rose bush that gets a lot of new growth but no buds?
So it kind of depends. It would be something that I would love to see. So roses these days are grafted. So grafting means that the above ground growth and the below ground growth are two different things. Very rarely you're ever going to find an ungrafted rose. What can sometimes happen is the graft will start growing and people don't realize which one it is. So a good gardener, a trained garden eye, could tell where that growth is coming from and realize this is the graft growth and not the actual growth that I want. And you may have trimmed away all of your above ground real growth, and now you just have the graft going. Sometimes that'll get really tall and weird and spindling, kind of crazy. So that is not the growth that you want. Sometimes it will make flowers, but tiny little kind of weird flowers. They're not very pretty. So that could be part of the problem. I would definitely come in, bring a piece of your rose and bring a couple of pictures. I would like to see a couple of different pictures of it so we can tell. The other problem could be is that you're not getting enough sun. And then I'm also wondering how you're fertilizing. So this is kind of what I do. Anytime someone comes, I'm like, okay, 20 questions. Here we go. Where do you live? How old is it? Is it in the ground? How are you irrigating? How are you fertilizing? Well, all of those questions make a big difference. Sometimes it's one thing and instantly I'm like, okay, I know what it is. Sometimes it's a combo of things. So it could be not enough sun. It could be the graft is growing and not the real part of the rose is growing. It could be a myriad of things. So bring in a piece, bring a picture, a couple of pictures, and be prepared for your 20 questions when you come in. And then we could probably answer that for you. I bet you if I saw it, I could probably figure out what it is.
Okay. How big does the Charlene get? Is it okay with humidity? And is it better when grafted on Fortunia stock?
So I'm not sure what stock that they use for the grafting. There's a couple of different stocks that they use. I'm sure if I called them and asked them, they would let me know. But usually you're not going to have any indication of what stock that it's on. This does get tall. So this is about 4 to 5 feet tall if you fully just let it growing just on its own and you're not keeping it cut back constantly. You're not cutting back the flowers. This would be a really nice one to put on like a short little kind of trellis of some sorts. I have a David Austin Lady of Shalott, and I have that on a nice little obelisk sort of thing because it does get a little tall and like a little bit floppy for me, so I like keeping it on there and keeping it tied, so that way I have this beautiful, it's like an apricot-y orange color rose up on that. This would do really well with that too. You want to make sure that it's getting full sun. The less sun that it's going to get, the taller it's going to get, and the smaller your flower is going to be for sure. So someplace where you can kind of keep it tied back, or if you're doing it in a nice big open area, again, think about the height of it and then you're working your way down. So it's definitely going to get really a lot of height on it. I don't know what rose stock that it's going to be on. This is actually pretty immune to a lot of, like, resistant to a lot of powdery mildew and rust, particularly rust problems. If you have a lot of humidity, you just got to be real diligent about how you water and real diligent about how you cut it back and keeping it thinned out. If you see something growing up in the middle, like I see a piece growing up here in the middle, if I lived in someplace really humid, this little piece is kind of growing up this way towards the center, not out, I would probably just cut that out right away and not even let it get started. It's real hard to do that if it's got a bud on it, so do it early. But yeah, keeping it thinned out, pulling some of this like inner leaves, and you can just pull and they pop right off. That would definitely help with keeping the humidity problems. You're thinking kind of like tomatoes, same thing with tomatoes. You want it real open and you want that movement of air in there. That'll definitely help with it. And if you're feeding it well and you're keeping the soil really nice and healthy, you shouldn't have too many problems with humidity creating any kind of fungal issues and things like that. But yeah, you would go in and kind of thin this out. So I'm thinning out just some of the leaves in the middle, so that way it's got a little openness. This one's super bushy. Like I said, it just came off the truck, so it's just so beautiful. But this one really being thinned out like that, it's going to be so much better down in here because your flowers are going to be up here anyways. You don't need all that foliage down at the bottom, especially if you're gardening well and you're putting stuff around the base of it to kind of hide those bare legs basically. But yeah, thinning that out will definitely help.
Is it okay to water it in the afternoon or evening in the summer?
It's okay. It's still not the best practice because you are going to be creating a little bit of that extra humidity. If you come home and your roses are super wilty and so sad, go ahead and water them. You don't want them to collapse too often, especially if they have buds on it, because that will affect how that bud opens and it won't be as pretty and big and lush. But try to stay away from that practice. Early morning is always going to be so much better than afternoon. So try to get out of that practice. But if, like I said, if you come home and it's been like a really particularly hot Santa Ana day, or it was just a really extra random hot day that we had, giving a little bit of water is fine. Not on the foliage. Never on the foliage. Ever. Never. So you want to stay away from doing that. When it comes to spraying things, spraying early in the morning and spraying in the evening is okay. You're not spraying a whole lot because you're trying to obviously kill some kind of bug or insect or something like that. So nighttime spraying is all right, especially if we're in the heat of the summer because we don't want to burn our plants. So a little bit of spraying here and there at nighttime is all right. Just don't make that a huge practice where you're doing it all the time because it's just bad horticulture practice for your plants.
When they get very tall, should I trim them down?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what's really nice too? People come in with roses and sometimes the rose is just so infected with something, like it's just the whole thing's covered with rose slug that creates those little holes, or it's just absolutely loaded with rust. I will tell people all the time, strip your whole entire rose, even if it's like gasp the middle of summer, you can still totally do that because they will flush out again. So sometimes the best thing to do is cut it back and strip it. You can do definitely summer pruning. I do my big pruning in January at the very beginning of the year, and then I do another like kind of summer prune because you'll keep getting flushes of roses, and especially I cut it a little bit hard on the canes, not as hard as I do in January. But maybe a quarter to half of what I normally do, and just really kind of do a big, good cleanup. Usually I do that in July. I kind of let the roses sort of talk to me. It just depends on the variety. Some varieties are a little bit different. And I'll do that good, nice prune, and I'll get another nice, good flush in the fall because we start cooling down again. So you'll get kind of almost like another little springtime flush in the fall again if you do that nice pruning. So usually January-ish. It just kind of depends on how hot and late we're being that year. It's just California weather. You never know. It's super crazy. I'm wearing a skirt and a hoodie. I don't know. It's hot and weird here, and sometimes it's cold and the day changes within the hour. It's kind of amazing. But yeah, doing a hard prune is totally fine. Just you don't go crazy hard, and only strip if you really are looking at it and you're like, oh, it's loaded with something, and I just, even spraying this, even if you spray it, the leaves are ruined, so you can go ahead and strip and let them grow again. And definitely fertilize. If you're doing something like that, make sure you do it right before you do a nice big heavy fertilizing, and I would definitely use both of these to help kind of flush out that new growth on it.
What do you mix other than soil when planting in the ground?
So I like to use compost. My favorite compost, especially for roses, is the Malibu Compost. It's really, really concentrated, so you don't need a whole lot of it. When you're digging your hole to put it in the ground, the rule is you want your hole wider than the pot, but not deeper than the pot. So you're taking out a big wide space, and then you're taking that soil that you took out of that hole. Once you put the root ball into the hole, you want to make sure the root ball, the top of the root ball, is level with the existing soil. Then I take that soil that I took out of the hole, I mix it 50-50 with that compost, and I put it back in and I pack it around the edges. Never really a whole lot on the top. You don't want to smother out the top. Some people will plant the roses too deep, and that creates a lot of problems too. And you'll even have whole canes die out from that. So you're going to pack that around 50-50 mixed with, I love the Malibu compost. Malibu compost is fantastic. It really makes you look like the best gardener ever, and the soil's doing all the work. So that's a really, really great one to use.
The monthly fertilizer, can you show?
Yeah, so there's two different things. I like the down to earth. So this is the one that you're going to use once a month, about a fourth of a cup to about a half of a cup, especially for like a tree rose. This one is a granular. You don't have to mix it with water. You just put it down on the ground, put it around the drip line. So the drip line is not up against the trunk. The drip line is at the edges of the rose. So you do a nice little ring around that. And then you use the water to mix that in. You can use your hands to mix it in. Don't dig it in. You don't have to hardcore rake it in because you don't want to break up any of the shallow roots you have growing on your rose. So down to earth, super fantastic, Omni rated, all organic, which is amazing. And then the Malibu. This is the Malibu Compost Tea. I love the Malibu Compost Tea. This is a really, really amazing addition to your fertilizer. It will help your rose bring up all the fertilizer. It will keep all the soil really happy. This has a little bit of cow manure. This is from Malibu, just like the compost that I really like. It's got yarrow and chamomile, valerian, stinging nettle, worm castings, all kinds of stuff in there that really helps the soil be alive. That's so important, because when you're using all those synthetic things, it's just killing all the good stuff in the soil. I mean, think about when we're driving around and you're looking at the hillsides in Tustin and out even in Corona when it's rained and everything's all lush and beautiful and great because it's getting the rain. No one's fertilizing that. That's just all alive soil. That's all stuff that has, there's decomposing stuff in there from the previous year. It's all the alive stuff that's going on in there. And that's what you're really trying to recreate in our ground. It's not sterile. It's not an operating room. We want all the good stuff in there, all the worms and all the beneficial bacterias and all the nematodes and all the good stuff. You want that in your soil. The best soil is soil that you dig in and something's moving. That's the soil you want to see. You want it rich, you want it dark, you want it lush, you want to look at it and it's like almost good enough to eat. That's the kind of soil you want. You don't want the gray kind of sandy stuff that just looks horrible. So that's what we're trying to always recreate. And that's what keeps your plants the happiest. Plants just like people. If you eat bad, and let's say you're going through a drive-through every single night and you're not eating anything good, and then you get sick. When you get sick, you get really sick, right? So if you're really healthy and you're taking care of yourself and you're drinking your water, you're eating your good food, when you get sick, you fight it off really fast, or you don't get sick at all. You can fight it off before it even happens. Plants are exactly the same way. They're a living thing. They need all that good nutrients and all that living stuff to keep them alive and healthy. So that's what I always tell everybody. Plants just like people. It's amazing.
Okay.
Let's talk to them. Love them. Tell them how much you love them. They're going to love you back, I promise.
Last question. Is it best to add mulch to the soil?
Yeah, so the mulch is similar to like a compost. Mulch, typically when we're talking about mulch, a lot of people are talking about the stuff they're putting on top of the soil. So that's going to be like composted or shredded up wood and things like that. But it's funny, people interchangeably use that for compost, which compost is going to be more like soil. So if you're going to mulch on top, you're going to put like wood chips or shredded mulch. I like the shredded mulch much, much better. I don't like to put it right up against the trunk. So if you're layering stuff on top, like a true mulch, like a shredded mulch, I don't want it to go all the way up against the trunk. It also makes fertilizing a little tricky. So I like to just mulch to the drip line. So I want to keep that area open so that way I can still add stuff to it. I also mulch with compost. So mulch is kind of a funny interchangeable word. I mulch with the Malibu compost. I usually do that once or twice a year. It just depends on how busy I am here, quite honestly. But I'll layer that stuff on top, just a thin layer, and I will put that underneath the drip line and up towards the trunk, not straight up against the trunk, because it's spongy-like in a way that holds water, and you don't want to create a weird, spongy, moist condition up against something that's established. So I still leave a little bit of layer there, but I'll do a small little layer of it, maybe half an inch, maybe an inch, and I just kind of let it work its way into the ground and add all that great stuff. If you're mulching with any kind of shredded mulch or cedar or redwood, something like that, just not up against the trunk, it breaks down too, adds good stuff to the ground, keeps that ground cool when it's hot and hot when it's warm, or hot when it's cold. So it's really kind of needs like an insulating layer, and that does break down and adds good stuff into the ground too slowly over the time. So you have to keep occasionally doing that. Also just looks nice, keeps the weeds down, makes it so you have to water less. So it's a really great thing if you're mulching with like something shredded. Shredded is the best in my opinion because it does kind of mesh together and works a lot better. The chipped wood looks pretty, and a lot of people like the look of that, but it blows around. If a gardener comes, is using a blower, goes all over the place. If an area gets flooded, it floats away. So I like the shredded stuff a lot better, and it's a lot better for the ground too. So yeah, that's definitely a good practice for everything pretty much, because it really does help keep your soil happy as well. So anyways, thank you so much for tuning in. Please come visit us this weekend. I'm super excited. You're going to see me walking around. You'll see Suzanne walking around. James is going to be talking about natives. Dave is going to be talking about vegetables. So you're going to have us walking around talking to you about all of our favorite things here. The garden just looks gorgeous right now. Our display garden's beautiful. Even our parking lot is just like popping. It's so pretty right now. So make sure you come by. If you can't make it this weekend, make sure you're signed up for that email list so you know what we're going to do the next following weeks, because we have all kinds of really fun things coming up. The Monarch Day, I'm so excited about. We have an amazing surprise for you guys. Milkweed will be coming in. The Disneyland roses will be coming in. You can come in and see the Chantilly rose, the new rose that I have here in my hair. These are going to start flowering. There's little buds on these already. Walking through the rose area is just fantastic right now. Spring is here and I'm so excited. I love it so much this time of year. It's just absolutely amazing. So thank you for tuning in. Again, I'm Sarah Smith, a horticulturist here at Rogers Gardens. If you can't make it in on Saturday, make sure you're stalking our Facebook and our Instagram page, because we're going to do a couple of little pop-up lives maybe to show you what we have going on here. So if you can't come in that weekend and you're going to come in the following weekend, make sure you follow those and check those out, because we have some fun stuff coming up for you all. So thank you so much. Be well and be safe and happy gardening. Bye.